Hi everyone, it's me again, back in my cosy spot in my house where I like to curl up and read a book. And today I'm going to read you chapter 19 of Kid Normal, and chapter 19 is called Murph Alone. A mile away, oblivious to the dramatic events unfolding at his soon-to-be ex-school, Murph was grumpy, really grumpy. In fact, if you saw him, you'd go as far to say he was full-on Grumpelstiltskin. Everything was annoying him. Fed up doesn't even start to cover it. He'd arrived back home, slung his bag down on the floor and flopped onto the sofa. To add to his annoyance, a wasp was buzzing around. Eventually, Murph succeeded in batting it out the window. This reminded him of Carl, which in turn made him feel bad for avoiding the caretaker today. But Murph was simply in one of those unavoidable funks. It wouldn't have improved Murph's mood to know that, not far away, Nicholas Knox had been watching him via the spy drone that Murph had just dealt with. Knox didn't want any witnesses to his plans, and he couldn't be sure that Murph hadn't seen the words Ribbon Robotics on the trucks that had passed him on their way into the school. He was a loose end, and Knox hated loose ends. He leaned forward and spoke quietly into his microphone. "Attack Drone 4. This is an emergency override. Code 24. Proceed to the location of Spy Drone 260 and obliterate the human target. Activate." On the top of the trucks, now speeding towards the factory, one of the large attack drones buzzed into life. It detached itself from its special rack and flew off on its deadly mission. Back at his house, Murph was following the rules of dealing with a bad mood. If you're not aware of these rules, here's a handy guide for the next time you're feeling rubbish. Things to do when you're in a funk. 1. First of all, it's important to embrace it. Be the grump. As long as you're not rude to people, it can be quite fun. Enjoy the feeling of being a moody old so-and-so for a bit. 2. Eat. You must eat plenty of treats to top up the happiness tank. 3. Drink. Fill up your belly with fizz. 4. Listen to sad music. If possible, use headphones. Go for a walk in the rain and pretend that you're in a sad film about your own life and this is the soundtrack. Murph had made himself a bowl of the sugariest cereal he could find, Rule 2, and settled down on the sofa, reaching for the remote control for the music system. Time for Rule 4. Mournful piano music began. He was ready to immerse himself in Wronged Murph, the movie. "Hello," the singer began. Bang! "It's me." Smash! Murph jerked his head towards the staircase. The almighty noise had come from upstairs. He jumped off the sofa, milk and sugary flakes leaping out the bowl and onto the floor as he did so. His heart was racing. "What on earth was that?" he said out loud to try and calm himself down. It didn't work. Maybe he was imagining things, he thought, though more out of hope than anything else. He just wanted a quiet afternoon listening to music and feeling sorry for himself. His hope was dashed as soon as he heard another bang, followed by the tinkling of glass. Murph crept over to the staircase and slowly started to climb. He had never noticed the stairs creaking before, but now he was on full alert. They seemed to have become the world's loudest steps. What was up there? As he reached the middle of the staircase, he heard a distant buzzing sound. He stopped dead in his tracks, frozen to the stairs like someone doing a lame impression of Spider-Man. There was silence, an eerie silence. Time stood still for a moment. And then there was a sudden roar that seemed to tear the air around him to shreds. With a cold splash of shock, Murph realised the staircase actually was being torn to shreds. He was being shot at. He threw himself blindly to one side as something flew at him with incredible speed, firing as it went. Ornaments downstairs in the hall dinged and clattered as they were shot to pieces. Murph rushed to the top of the stairs and at the summit hopped behind the laundry basket on the landing. He peered cautiously over the top. Hovering just above the floor, down by the front door, was a giant wasp. Wisps of smoke rose from the gun barrels mounted on either side. The drone seemed to be collecting itself, ready for another tack run. Before it had a chance to move, Murph left the safe haven of the basket, dashed to his bedroom, and shut the door. He needed a plan. On the plus side, there was a home match for Murph. He figured that he had a slight advantage because he knew the layout of his house. You may argue that the fire-breathing attack wasp with powerful mounted machine guns also had a fair shot at this battle, but the years of moving house and making and losing friends had made Murph Cooper pretty unflappable. He could now hear the drone outside his bedroom door hovering, thinking about what to do next. A couple of times it let off a salvo of gunfire, as if this would encourage Murph to come out. The door shook as bullets thudded into it. What it did encourage Murph to do was open his window and prepare to escape, but before he could figure out his next move, the drone lost patience and began burning his bedroom door down. Smoke billowed in. He knew he had seconds to get out. He grabbed the cricket bat he'd been given for Christmas, climbed onto the window ledge and began to shimmy down the bathroom drainpipe. He started slowly inching down with his hands and trying to cling on with his feet until he realised he was losing his grip and couldn't proceed at this rate. He had no choice but to free fall. Luckily it wasn't that far off the ground when his fingers decided to give up, and he landed neatly in one of his mum's shrubberies, squashing a large purple plant. She'll shout at me for that, he thought, then remembered that his bedroom door was on fire and that maybe shrubs wouldn't be the priority, even purple ones. Murph picked himself up and darted round to the front door of the house. Slowly and silently he opened it. The house was starting to fill with smoke. Murph could hear the crackle of burning upstairs, but he couldn't see or hear his enemy. He needed to make it to the kitchen, which had 2 different doors to the outside, so if things went wrong he would be able to escape through one of them. He assumed the drone was upstairs, still trying to burst into his bedroom. He assumed wrong. The drone had burst into his bedroom, but what Murph didn't realise was that it had quietly tracked him all the way outside and was now hovering behind his head, the buzz of its rotors covered by the crackle of the spreading flames now visible at the top of the stairs. As he started to creep across the lounge, Murph froze. He knew something was wrong, and suddenly he registered the tickle of a light breeze on his neck. His fingers flexed on the handle of the cricket bat, and in one quick, sharp movement he raised the bat up and over his head as if he were using an axe in reverse, smacking the drone off target seconds before it opened fire. Machine guns roared as the giant attack wasp flailed across the room, rotors whining frantically as it tried to correct its spin. Bullets sprayed everywhere, pinging off the mirror, douching into the sofa and smashing the stereo. Murph's eyes fell on the jumble of Wellington boots just outside the front door, and he remembered he'd hidden the grapple gun in one of them. As the drone tried to get itself back under control, he scrabbled frantically inside the boots, ending up with quite a smelly left hand, but also, eventually, the gun. Just as the drone took aim at him for its final deadly assault, Murph pulled the trigger. The hook exploded out across the room and into the kitchen, smashing into the oven door and wrapping itself around the handle. Murph pressed the button on the stock of the gun and was catapulted into the kitchen as the grappling line reeled itself in at speed. He impressed himself by landing safely by the oven, silently thanking Carl as he did. Murph dropped the grapple gun and started to look around for a weapon. As the drone appeared in the doorway, he threw everything he could get his hands on at it. Rolling pin, boom, kettle, clatter, saucepans, ting, splang, dong, his mum's favourite wok, bang, that was the biggest one. A small part of him was actually enjoying this, but another much larger part was panicking. He was running out of utensils. Suddenly a thought occurred to his frantic brain. If he could stop this thing flying around, surely he'd have a chance at nailing it. He went to the window sill where his mum kept a classic mum item, a bowl of interesting stones that she'd brought back from a day at the beach the previous summer. Scientists have tried but failed to explain why some mums do this. Stones are amongst the many items you can put under the umbrella of mum things, along with Native American dream catchers, delicate porcelain swans, and 37% more tissues than could ever realistically be required by a human. Anyway, back to the action. Murph grabbed a handful of beach stones. "Come and get me," he taunted. Guns blazing, the machine flew fast at his head, but Murph was ready. He flung himself onto the tiled kitchen floor. As the drone's momentum carried it above his head, Murph hurled the stones upwards, and with a clang, a splutter, and a ping, its blade shattered. The drone fell from the air and smashed into the ground behind the metal kitchen bin. Sparks, debris, and 5-day-old tea bags went everywhere. Then, blissful silence. Murph had managed to restore order. He was very pleased with his action-packed last half hour on Earth. Phew, he breathed. He wandered dazedly out of the kitchen and began staggering around the place. It didn't look like his house anymore. All the pictures were wonky. The TV was smashed and there were bullet holes and broken glass strewn everywhere. Smoke billowed down the stairs, blocking off the hallway completely. What in the blue heck is going on, thought Murph to himself finally. What was that thing? One thing was for certain. The boring house had just become the venue for one of the least boring episodes in Murph's life. He decided to take a few moments to compose himself and work out what he'd tell Mum. But before he could begin to start thinking of an excuse, a noise started that made the hairs on the back of his neck stand up. And in fact, the hairs on the front of his neck, which he hadn't even realised were there. It was a sinister, high-pitched whine as the damaged drone rose slowly out from behind the rubbish bin, supported by a set of reserve blades that had emerged from its hatch on the back. The drone had a plan B. Murph did not. Helplessly he watched as the guns which had been knocked out of position swiveled around until the barrels were pointing right at him. This was the end. At least Murph thought it was, right up until he saw a figure holding what looked like an unopened umbrella creep through the back door of the kitchen. Mary rushed up behind the drone. There was a loud crack and a whirring sound like a crashing helicopter as she shoved her umbrella into the reverse blade. The drone spun frantically around, lurching drunkenly across the kitchen. In desperation, it activated its flamethrower and spewed fire in a wide circle like an extremely expensive and dangerous firework. With a metallic clang, it careered through the smashed door of the oven, which immediately filmed with flames. After a moment, there was a huge explosion. The drone, consumed by its own firepower, was reduced to spare parts. There would be no way back this time. It was done for. "Murph!" yelled Mary. "Are you there?" Murph could just make her out through the smoke, and beyond that he could see Hilda, Nellie and Billy watching nervously from the doorway. "Over here!" shouted Murph, crawling underneath the thick smoke that was now filling the kitchen. "I'm over here and I appear to be fine. What the salad is going on? What was that?" Choking, the five of them staggered out through the back door and stood in the garden. Murph looked around, still baffled by what had just happened and what his chums were doing there. Mary tried to put into words the current state of affairs and couldn't, so they just continued to stand there and take stock. Billy eventually interrupted the silence. "So, here's the deal," he told Murph. "The school's been taken over by an evil wasp man and everyone's been imprisoned or brainwashed. Teachers too, except us." "What? What do you mean, a wasp man?" replied Murph. "We don't really know," said Hilda. "He's just weird and waspy and his weapons are all wasps and it's all bonkers, but he means business and he's got a lot of helpers, one of which you just managed to finish off in the kitchen." "With the help of my umbrella," chipped in Mary as she checked it for damage. Murph took a final look back at his house. It was a complete wreck. Flames were licking out the first floor windows, and at that moment there was another explosion from the kitchen. He had no idea how he was going to explain this to his mum, but there was no time to worry about that now. Murph Cooper had been through a lot, but he'd had enough of feeling miserable. He was fed up with being fed up. He thought about what Mary had said to him only that morning, about not letting things get to you. Then he remembered something Flora had told him during one of their morning chess sessions. No one except a hedgehog ever got anywhere by rolling into a ball. Murph wasn't a hedgehog, and it was time to take control of the situation. Even though Mr. Flash had done his best to beat any joy out of him, even though he was fated to leave in a few weeks, he liked the school, and even though he'd been a total misery to his friends earlier that day, they had rushed to save him. For the first time in years, he felt part of something. "We need to save the school," Murph stated simply. "But Murph, I don't know how we can do that," said Mary anxiously. "We're not super enough. We need a hero and we haven't got one. Who can help us now?" And suddenly Murph understood. It was Mary's question that had been the key. Who could help them now? Only one person, someone who had not been seen for a very, very long time. "Where are we going, Murph?" shouted Billy as they pelted through the town centre. Can you see that? "Hurry up," Murph panted. "Back to the school before it's too late." Minutes later, they tore through the gates and across the front yard. Murph led them around the back and across the playing fields. The empty assault course lay to one side, but over by the woods, a stream of smoke could be seen coming out the chimney on top of a ramshackle collection of wooden huts. They could hear a metallic hammering coming from inside. "He stayed close by, but doesn't want anyone to know," puffed Murph as they ran. "He's got the equipment. He knows too much to be just a caretaker. I only just worked it out for sure. Carl is the answer." "What?" said Mary as they stopped outside the huts, gasping for breath. "How can Carl help? How can Carl save us?" "He's not just Carl," said Murph triumphantly. "He's the Blue Phantom." The others looked at him in amazement. Then they did a collective, "Oh!" Murph nodded and knocked on the door of the hut. The clanging noise stopped abruptly. Carl opened the door slowly. "Oh, it's you lot. Thank goodness you're safe. And what the heck are you doing back here? It's far too dangerous for little mice like you to be running around." "We've come to save the school and you're the only one who can help," Murph said earnestly. "Me?" laughed Carl. "What am I going to do? Grab my broom and brush the baddies away?" "No, Carl, we know who you are. The game's up," said Mary confidently. "We know your secret," chirped Hilda. "Oh, do you?" said Carl. Yes, we do," piped up Billy, partially inflating his left thigh with nervous excitement. Even Nellie got carried away in the moment and skittered around silently like a dog who knows it's about to go walkies. Carl waited, holding the door half closed, eyebrows raised. "You're the Blue Phantom," said Murph simply. There was a pause, and then Carl let out a wheeze that turned out to be laughter. "Brilliant. Well, I've heard it all now. Sorry, kids, not me," he said. "Now best get yourselves home. It's not safe here for the likes of you." And he slammed the door in their faces. Murph couldn't even look at his friends. How could he have been so wrong? He'd been certain he'd worked it out. "It must be him. It just doesn't make sense," he murmured, deflated. "But you heard it from his own mouth," said Mary gently. "He isn't the Blue Phantom." "Well, who is then?" Hilda breathed. Nobody said anything for a moment, and then an unexpected voice broke in from behind them. I am the Blue Phantom, said the voice. It says the end, but it's not the end, because there's still a lot to go. So they're obviously teasing you. And I'm really, really sorry, but you're going to have to wait till Monday to find out who that voice belonged to. Hope you have a lovely weekend. See you soon. Bye.